Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, the Supreme Court passes an interim order in the Gyanvapi Masjid dispute. Secure the Shivling area inside the mosque, but don't stop Muslims from praying. But that's just for now. It's an interim order. It comes up in court in a couple of days. All of that on a day when a court in Varanasi removed the official who was leading the videography survey. Now, this official was in charge when lawyers revealed that the contents of his survey were out even before it had been presented in court. But the larger issue is this: does the Hindu faith get stronger by imposing its might on minorities? When exactly do we stop digging for old temples? Is the Gyanvapi Masjid controversy an assertion of majoritarian power? That's our big debate. Later on the show, a very special guest, the new Confederation of Indian Industry Chief, Sanjeev Bajaj. At a time when the economy continues to face considerable headwinds, we ask, soaring inflation, lowering growth forecasts, is India staring now at stagflation, or is the India story still positive overall? So the big debate tonight, the Gyanvapi Masjid controversy, is this an assertion of majoritarian power? Joining us, Pawan Khera. We're also joined by Professor Gobardhan Das, the BJP leader and professor of the JNU, and we'll be joined by our other panelists in a little while from now. Professor Das, just reading the Ayodhya judgment itself, in addition to the 1991 Act, where is the legal basis for changing the fundamental character of the Gyanvapi Masjid?
So, good evening, Vishnu, and good evening, my fellow panelists. See, this is the legal battle of 352 years. So I would like to make there are 2 points. Number one, in my opinion, all the we live in the sovereign country. All the citizens have the right to know our history, and in fact, the Varanasi court rightfully, give an order to investigate by the ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, with 5 points. And I am not going in the deep in the 5 points, but I think this is the correct to find it out what is the fact. Then now, if after digging out the fact, what is going to happen, that will be decided by the court, decided by the Supreme Court. So that we have to live with it. Number two.
No,
so
sir,
if,
what the court has to go by the law.
Yes, okay.
What I'm trying to say is,
I'm coming back to your point.
Yes.
Allow me 30 seconds.
Yes.
In 1991, the places of worship, the Act, it says, if I really don't want to read the full, but it said the religious character of any place of worship as it existed on 15th August 1947.
Yes.
Very correct.
Yes.
In 1947, on 15th of August, what was the character of this place in this, right now, what we call Gyanvapi Masjid? One has to determine. One has to determine in 2 ways.
No, are you suggesting that the character of this historic dispute changed after independence?
No, absolutely not. Just if you can go back to the story, if you dig out, if they find it out, there is existence of temple.
No, absolutely,
below.
Sir. There may well be an existence of a temple. There may well be a Shivling over there. There may be other Hindu archaeological features. But Sir Govardhanji, that is something which existed prior to 1947.
That's correct.
1947 is the cutoff. After that, you cannot change. You cannot change. It is no longer in dispute.
Allow me to speak.
In dispute, but you cannot change the structure.
No, I'm not disputing that. Allow me to speak. Unless you allow me to speak, my opinion on go in, right?
I am. I disagree with that.
Allow me to speak. In that 1947, 15th of August, one has to find it out what was the character of this place, whether it is a mosque or is a temple. If it is a temple, you'll have existence of things.
Historically, the mosque has existed well before independence.
No, even well before independence. If you look at the 1936, the court order, it says this is not. I mean, somebody called Din Muhammad appeal to the court and says this is the, you declare this is the place
All right,
for the
okay.
mosque. And it says, is that
and yet the overall structure. All right, let me bring Pawan Khera in. Sir, one sec.
See, one thing,
I can have this discussion with you all evening, but Pawan ji is... No, one second, sir.
Let me finish. Give me 10 seconds. Let me finish. If you see this, somebody is the, किसी के घर पे जाके पोस्टर लगाने से तो क्या कहता है, किसी का मालिक नहीं बन जाता है ना. First, you find it out whether that
exactly
was a temple of the masjid. Right.
The entire architecture of this is not presently of a temple. It is of a masjid. There are domes over there. They are defining features. Yes, there may well be archaeological treasures over there which indicate a Hindu past. We're talking about changing its character. Pawan Khera, one second, sir. Yeah. Pawan Khera, do you accept the fact that the fundamental character, whether this is a mandir or a masjid, needs now to be investigated? That apparently that has not been established.
No, we need to first debate on where do we start history from. You want the Nagpur school of thought, a Nagpur nursery of thought, and start history from the 12th century or the Mamluk dynasty? Up to you. What if the Adivasis or the ancient ancestral South Indians,
years ago.
What if the Adivasis were to say, कि भैया Aryans ने जो किया, we have to undo? Tell me what will happen? What is this? हम बेवकूफ हैं क्या कि इस तरह की बातें कर रहे हैं यहाँ बैठकर? Now tell me, Vishnu, 1947, when partition happened, a lot of mosques in the Punjab region, Pepsu area, were converted into places of worship of other religions. Will you give it back to the Muslims if they were to seek कि भैया ये मस्जिद थी, दे दीजिए, हमें वापस देंगे क्या आप लोग? न तो आप आदिवासियों को उनकी जमीन वापस देंगे, आप भी आर्यन हैं, हम भी आर्यन हैं, बाहर से आए या मानिए या मत मानिए. कहां से इतिहास शुरू करेंगे मिस्टर गोवर्धन दास? हम भी इतिहास पढ़े हैं, जेएनयू से नहीं पढ़े हैं, कहीं और से पढ़े तो हैं. So you please decide. Wait, I'm not sorry. You can't interrupt me. You please decide, Vishnu. इतिहास शुरू कहां से होगा? ओरिजिनल इनहैबिटेंट कौन है, इन्वेडर कौन है, और इन्वेडर कौन कब आया? आपको शुरू करना है 12वीं शताब्दी से, तो 12वीं शताब्दी से शुरू करिए.
Atul ji joins us. Atul Garg, the senior BJP leader. Atul ji, we are a confident nation with a confident religion, Hinduism. We are proud of Hinduism as we are of every religion. Do we need to enforce that? Do we need to push that or thrust that, on top of a minority? Does one become a weaker Hindu that one has to thrust this opinion on a minority? Why can't we just live in peace?
मैं हिंदी में बोलना
नहीं जरूर बताइए.
सबसे पहले तो आप माइनॉरिटी कह किसे रहे हैं?
मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी को कह रहा हूं. इस विषय में मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी को कह रहा हूं.
मेरी बात सुन. पहली बात तो ये जो माइनॉरिटी हो रहा है, क्या जिस देश के अंदर सबसे ज्यादा मुसलमान रहते हो पूरी दुनिया के, क्या उसे माइनॉरिटी कहना चाहिए? अगर ये किसी ने कहा है माइनॉरिटी, तो क्या ये सबसे बड़ी
नहीं जी, ये माइनॉरिटी का डेफिनेशन हम तो बदल नहीं सकते.
अब आपके विषय पे आते.
अब माइनॉरिटी शब्द का डेफिनेशन तो हम बदल नहीं सकते अतुल जी. हिंदूज आर माइनॉरिटीज, मुस्लिम्स आर माइनॉरिटीज, majority Muslims are minority. That is a fact, sir.
No, it is not a fact, but it is something usually to say. ठीक है, ऐसा ये.
But anyway, carry on with the rest of your answer. Yeah.
पर इसे कभी विषय पे रख लीजिएगा आज. दूसरी बात मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं. जी. पहले मेरे को मुस्लिम लीडर से पूछवाइए जो ये कह रहा हो कि यहाँ पर साहब मंदिर तो था, जो ये कह रहा हो कि यहाँ पर शिवलिंग तो निकला है, जो ये कह रहा हो कि ये हिंदुओं की आस्था का बहुत बड़ा केंद्र तो.
Okay, sorry Atul ji, आपका लाइन थोड़ा खराब है. I'll come back to you in a second. But Professor Das, 1 minute, sir.
Yes.
Ayodhya verdict, paragraph 652. For any person who seeks solace or recourse against the actions of any number of ancient rulers, the law is not the answer. Our history is replete with actions that have been judged to be morally incorrect, even today are liable to trigger ideological debate. Let's have an ideological debate. But this is what the rules say, sir. We follow rules. You have to follow the rules. I have to follow the rules. We can debate it.
Yes, very. You are very correct. Let me first answer my, honorable, the fellow panelist Pavanji. All I wanted to say it is our right to know the history, what is going to happen, whether there's a latter course of action. That is.
So is that where it ends, sir? The right to know one's history, because I don't think anybody would dispute that. I think it is changing the character of this place of worship which people dispute. Learning about one's history is an intellectual exercise. That's fine.
Now, there are 2 points. You allowed to speak. Otherwise, this is the one-way talk, isn't it?
No. Go ahead.
If the first thing is, it is our right to know the history. Number 1. And the number 2, on 1947, 15th of August, that was a temple or a mosque. So that another thing
the domes of the structure, the people who used to pray there, how can you say that it wasn't a masjid?
Come on.
It's a masjid which may have been created on top of a temple. That is the debate which historians have to find out. But you cannot change the definition, sir.
So it's a definition. So if a place, if there is the thousands year, this is a 2000 year, the Shivling is there.
Yes.
If you agree. If
it may well be there, sir.
No. If it is there, no. But if there is a tomb made on top of it, it becomes a mosque.
No, right. And that is where you're wrong, sir. And I'll tell you why you're wrong, sir. Yeah. Again, let's refer to the landmark Ayodhya judgment, which in your book is landmark, sir. Right? Let us look at human history is testament to the rise. No, sir. This is very important, this line. It answers the point you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Human history is testament to the rise and fall of rulers and regimes. The law cannot be used as a device to reach back in time and provide a legal remedy to every person who disagrees with the course which history has taken. It's in black and white, sir. Not just this paragraph, any number of paragraphs. And yes, there are parts of Ayodhya which you can also use to support your argument. But, Tanveer Ahmed Mir, let me come to you, sir. The other part of this is the 1991 Act. How does Ayodhya, the landmarked Ayodhya verdict, actually endorse 1991? Because people are also saying that 1991 needs to be relooked at. In fact, it's up in the Supreme Court as well. But how does Ayodhya, the verdict, actually back up 1991, which says places which are disputed, religious places, do not change their fundamental identity?
The Ayodhya verdict wholeheartedly and authoritatively endorses the 1991 Act. And therefore, once a constitutional bench of the Honorable Supreme Court authoritatively endorses a particular piece of legislation, if that legislation is changed, you doing something which the late Prime Minister Shri Rajiv Gandhi did in Shahbanu's case. At the end of the day, all these actions which have started, we cannot deny that in a society there will always be claims and counterclaims, whether they are based on deity, whether they are based on faith, or whether they are based on certain claims which certain people would have. Right? So those claims are there, they will be there for eternity. They are to be contested, accepted, acknowledged, compromised or otherwise. But what we cannot lose sight for is that prior to gaining of independence, we were under the British rule. Before that, we were split kingdoms, each kingdom having its own sovereignty, having its own history. History is replete. That's what their lordships have said in the Ayodhya verdict. Remember, it's after gaining independence that we are one nation, one constitution, one people, with sovereign integrity and diversity, and we swear to the written constitution of India. As per the constitution, the people are supreme. The government is to serve the people of this country. I understand as a common Indian citizen that in India, to refer anybody as majority and minority is nothing less than an insult to Indians. Nevertheless, once you have a written constitution, you have an enacted law. If the government of the day, the dispensation of the day, and my fellow panelists are there who are legislators, they're politicians are not. If they have the wherewithal and the will to change the law, the Supreme Court then is not going to say that, all right, you have no power in changing the law. But if you enact a new law, it is definitely amenable to a due process or a legislative challenge. Therefore, now, once the law is there, it is to be respected till it's not changed.
Right.
Therefore, any political narratives.
And I think, sir, and I'm just interrupting because, I've run short of time over here. If there is a judgment in the Supreme Court which puts aside 1991 and says that interpretation can take place of disputed religious structures, then that opens up a Pandora's box. Heaven help us if that were to happen in a country like ours. That's the big worry. We want peace most of all, and perhaps that would be problematic if that were to happen. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. Some comments. Pavanji, I'm sorry I couldn't come back to you. I apologize for that. A couple of comments on coup which have come in. Mohit says, in the past, the destruction of religious shrines may have been the function of state power, but modern India cannot repeat the same logic. Shiv says, secularism will be deepened if it lets history be history, not make history the foundations of a secular ethic. Ramdhari Singh says, the matter is sub judice. We should wait for a decision by the judiciary. I think it's Jeet. Yeah, Jeet says, in the case of Kashi or Mathura, will it also be known as an example of assertion of majoritarian power? In fact, that's what we were asking on this program tonight. The new Confederation of Indian Industry President Sanjeev Bajaj takes over at a time when there are considerable issues afflicting our economy and 1 billion plus nationals, even as India tries to get back on the fast growth trajectory. While the growth numbers in the post-COVID context are encouraging, we find ourselves affected by record inflation rates, food insecurity, foreign investors selling Indian stocks, among other challenges. That's a lot of work to be dealing with, a lot of issues. Joining us now, Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, the Chairman and Managing Director of Bajaj Finserv, a company which serves millions of customers in India through a host of financial services. Congratulations, Mr. Bajaj, on this very important post as one of our foremost industry leaders. My first question, should the government cut taxes on petrol and fuel?
As CI, we believe that that would be a timely thing to do right now, as we know that to the common man, the two major burdens from inflation are high fuel prices and high food prices. We are hoping for a normal monsoon. That's what the early forecasts say, and that should help reduce the impact of food prices. In the last few years, as oil prices fell, taxes were taken up, and I hope that in a collaborative manner between the central and the state governments, they can cut taxes on fuel so that they reduce the burden on the common man. It's also important because in the last few quarters, we are seeing the restart of domestic consumption. We are seeing new private investment coming up in multiple sectors, not just in commodities that we were seeing, but we've seen it in chemicals, we're seeing it in real estate and housing, we are seeing it in construction. And we need these tailwinds to continue. So inflation is controlled partly by government action, partly by RBI's action. Hopefully then that provides us with a continued runway for reasonably good growth.
So, Mr. Bajaj, another key issue, it's come up of late, the entire issue of wheat exports. Does the government's flip-flop on wheat exports send out a poor international signal because there were so many international expectations?
I believe that we live in a very uncertain world. We know that this is driven mainly by this heat wave, which has affected us. Nobody could anticipate it. And that's why the government is playing both a role internationally. It also has to secure the internal requirements of its citizens, and that's what it's trying to do.
Right. But in this present scenario, there was no option. Was there no option but to ban, the wheat export, other than, of course, to those who we'd already cleared for wheat exports? No other option, sir?
Yes, I believe that they will continue orders prior to a particular period of time. Plus, I believe that the government has said that on a government-to-government basis, wherever there is clear requirement, the government will support those countries. And beyond that, these are volatile times. I don't think we can blame the government for that. The government could have chosen not to allow exports at all and would not have this discussion. So we need to give them some space as well for these kind of sudden changes that we are seeing driven by externalities.
So, when we're talking about inflation, the RBI, of course, moved in proactively. They increased interest rates. But I think a lot of people would want to know that since inflation was progressively rising, do you share the opinion that perhaps the RBI could have been involved earlier on in righting the inflation situation?
That's a difficult question. It's a no-win kind of question. RBI, if it wasn't for war, would have started, I believe, the interest rate reversal cycle a few months ago. Given the uncertainties of war, I believe that they continued with their accommodative stance that they referred to even in the last meeting. The suddenness of this increase has caught, I must say, all of us by surprise. And I would hope that one swallow doesn't a summer make, but rather RBI gets back in its next review in June to presenting a more stable picture and a calibrated picture of how we would see future rate hikes.
Mr. Bajaj, we are very famous in our country for setting disinvestment targets and even more famously failing to achieve them. It's not just this government, many other governments in the past. But let's talk about now disinvestment of LIC. Did the government sell what many see as a really precious asset, in a market which was at its worst?
I believe the larger intent of the government is what must be recognized. Not only with LIC, but with Air India prior to that. I believe Pavanant's will go on sale right now. I'm very much hoping, and the government has stayed committed, at least in our discussions with them, that the privatization of the two public sector banks and one general insurance company will happen as well. It is the larger action from the government that we have to take note of. In the short term, there could be naturally ups and downs because of such a volatile external scenario.
Mr. Bajaj, foreign investors selling Indian stocks, does this reflect a worry on the overall India growth expectations?
So Vishnu, this is to me very clearly a reversal of the period of high liquidity. Period of high liquidity, excess money ends up going into safe havens, goes into safe stocks. That readjustment is what has already started happening. I continue to believe that capital will chase good opportunities, and as long as we are building good, solid businesses for the future, whether we are a startup or an incumbent, we will get access to capital. But it is also very clear in these times, we can't rely only on foreign capital to fund our growth. If we have to become a large, strong economy, we have to build a strong domestic financial services industry.
Mr. Bajaj, let's talk a little bit about the middle class who are really suffering in the present scenario with inflation, and even those who are from economically less privileged backgrounds. Banks have a 5% deposit rate or thereabouts. We have 8% inflation, and money seems to therefore be losing value even in banks. Isn't this the worry? The power of savings is diminished very, very fast.
So this present small window that we have seen with effective negative interest rates is what will get adjusted with RBI taking rates up, and hopefully as a result of that, inflation coming down. Eventually, as our economy expands, there will be additional savings in the pockets of the middle class, and we have to see how to channelize these savings into more productive assets rather than just keeping them in bank deposits, more productive financial assets, because typically by the time you're $2,500 per capita GDP, you've taken care of your large physical needs, home, house, children's education. So that is what we have to incentivize the common man for, and then to see that from those financial assets, how can we deploy them for long-term benefits for the country.
One final question, we were talking about wheat exports, obviously food security. there's also the entire issue of power supply, and both of these are affected by extreme climate, situations. The intense heat has affected wheat growth in India. Power supply has gone up sharply, again because of the intense heat. Coal in short supply in some places. So the question is this: is climate change now a serious economic threat to India that we really must start recognizing?
It absolutely is. And we can see this current heat wave. None of us have experienced anything like this in our lives. It is driving change faster than we know. And as Indian industry and as a country, we have to take cognizance of it, step up to ensure that we green ourselves faster. You will see, even internationally, you will see funds flowing only or more and more into those companies that build sustainable businesses. I also believe that we create a whole new set of sunrise industries that will move us towards net zero. So it is both a threat, a responsibility, but also very much an opportunity.
Well, Mr. Bajaj, let's hope that that optimism that you have in the Indian economy bears fruit in the long run. Certainly, there are green shoots over there, and India is spoken about very highly by many who believe that the pace of coming out of COVID is quite positive. But as we've discussed, there are several factors, many of them within the Indian economy itself, which really need to be looked at very closely. Out of time on Left, Right and Centre from all of us over here. Goodbye.